I'm JC Guy. I'm the Director of Global Health Advocacy here at the UN Foundation, working for Mike Beard and for Nothing But Nuts. Mike?
And I'm Mike Beard, and I work for JC Guy. I spend most of my days doing advocacy on behalf of all of the UN Foundation's campaigns and initiatives. My title is the Executive Director of UN Foundation Advocacy. I've spent most of my days talking to you about malaria, as well as spent a lot of time on the World Health Organization.
So we're here today to talk to you guys about Congress. Mike and I, in our former lives, both worked on Capitol Hill. We worked in the Better Chamber, which is the House of Representatives, of course. And we're really excited to give you a peek into our world and to the things that we do every single day, because you will be doing them in just a short amount of time. So Mike, you want to give us a scene setter? Where are we in Washington? We have a new administration, a new Congress. What's going on?
You were probably one of the last groups here in Washington before everything shut down. And so to say that everything has changed would be an understatement. As everybody knows, November happened, a new Congress was elected, a new administration was elected. One of the hallmarks of the Trump administration was to shake things up and changing up how we do foreign policy. The Biden team is actually a little bit of a return to normal, but more about trying to put in people who have the experience, who know how to get things done, people who have been in the trenches, who have been able to enact policy, who have thought big about malaria and foreign policy. In the last 3 months, we have the confirmations of Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who was the Deputy Secretary of State during the Obama administration. We have Linda Thomas Greenfield, who was the Assistant Secretary of State for the Africa Bureau, who is now our new U.S. Ambassador to the UN. The former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, is now going to be over at USAID running our development and humanitarian response programs. And then I think more than anything, as we look at all of the personnel decisions that have been made, the Biden-Harris team are putting a particular focus on returning to our allies and trying to restore the ties that we've had since World War II. So the reinvigoration of the World Health Organization, the focus on supporting for the Global Fund, and it's really interesting. And I think we'll see this played out a lot over the next 3 to 4 years. There's this idea that a return to normalcy isn't actually, it needs to go farther because we have new challenges here in the United States, but also around the world that we have not really even faced before. So I think it's a return to normalcy with an asterisk. I don't know. What do you think when you've thought about this last year, especially these last 3 months, JC?
I'm really excited for a return to boring, to be very frank. I'm excited to not wake up in a panic. I'm excited to have a little bit of process and structure come back into play. Once you work on the Hill, that's what you live and breathe for is rules and someone telling you what's supposed to happen at all states of the game. And as you laid out, Mike, the entire kind of team coming into DC is going to be one to watch, absolutely, especially as we refocus our efforts in foreign policy. So I'm going to touch really quickly before we get into some more interesting stuff, just on some basics here. What's Congress? Like, where are we going? What is happening? So our quick and easy guide to Congress. There are 2 chambers within the Congress. We have the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate is designated with 2 senators per state. As per the Constitution, you have 100 senators. Then we have 435 members of Congress, or in the House of Representatives. There are currently 5 seats vacant in the House, so technically only 430 members are there right now. The senators get to serve for 6 years once elected, and the House members only get to serve for 2, which is one of the reasons why Mike and I think the House is so much fun. There's always something happening, always things going on, and we don't have as many rules to remember as the Senate. And obviously, the main reason we want to talk to you about that today is because Congress has the paramount power granted by the Constitution, and that is to legislate. So in Article 1 of the Constitution, it gives this awesome power to the Congress. And that's where you guys come in, which is really awesome because Congress has to listen to y'all. And that's exactly what you'll be reminding of them in a very polite way tomorrow when you go to Capitol Hill virtually. Congress, though, just to feed more a little into where Washington is at the moment, Congress is probably the most narrowly divided that we've seen in a very long time, certainly since I worked on the Hill and maybe even since before Mike was on the Hill decades ago. Democrats have a majority of only 8 seats in the House, and there is a tie-breaking vote by the president of the Senate, which is the vice president of the United States, because there was a 50-50 split in the Senate. And it took weeks to come up with a power sharing agreement between the Republicans and Democrats on the Senate side. Mike, do you remember a time where Capitol Hill was this contentious, perhaps in our recent memory? And can you talk a little bit about how these narrow margins might impact the work that we do?
I think your point is incredibly important, JC, about it being so narrowly divided. I will say that there is hope. It's not always that they are going to be overly contentious. I do think that this narrowly split Congress is going to actually mean a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of trying to find common ground on pieces of legislation. I think first off, the narrow split between the House and the Senate, and within the House and Senate, probably means that the fiscal conservatism that Republicans and even a lot of blue dog Democrats preach is going to come back with abandon. We've had 2 major stimulus packages. $1.9 trillion is no laughing matter. And even before that, the earlier CARES package that approached $1 trillion. That's a lot of money that they are spending right now, with some of it on foreign assistance. And we can talk about that more later. But so I think there will be an effort to rein in federal spending at some points. Back in 2011, the House and Senate and President Obama and Vice President Biden agreed to certain spending caps per each year. And if you could not break the spending caps, we are outside of the spending caps this year. But I think that also means that there is likely to be maybe a bigger deal on on trying to rein in federal spending a little bit. We as global health advocates, we have actually been pushing for more spending on foreign assistance. And I think, JC, you can explain why. But and because federal spending on foreign assistance is so small, it wouldn't affect us. But I think overall, like the fact that there are no spending caps is, I think, a good and a bad thing for what's going to happen this year and probably even next year on appropriations. So JC, we just talked a lot about some wonky stuff, or at least I have, and I apologize to everybody who needs to hear me dribble on through wonky issues like sequestration and spending caps. But it's been a year, and we recognize it's been a year. What have you seen in terms of like your meetings with the Hill lately? Like how has it been going? What is normal looking like right now?
That's a great question. I think that normal is looking a lot like this. Normal is looking like Zoom, and I think everyone's a little tired. But I think that we have a really interesting moment here that we probably haven't had in a while. The attention span of the Hill is very short. So something happens, they focus on it, and they move right on to the next big flashy thing that is going to take up your news cycle for the next 24 hours. Probably the last time that we saw something in global health catch the attention of Congress would probably be maybe the Zika crisis, but before that, Ebola. And we haven't really had a moment that's really captured the attention of Capitol Hill like COVID-19. And honestly, it's because COVID-19 has brought just how devastating an infectious disease can be on a family to each and every American. And that includes Capitol Hill. Members of Congress, their staff, their families, their friends, So every staffer, from staff assistant all the way up to the chief of staff and to the member themselves for the last year, has been pretty similar, like solely focused on COVID-19 response, on getting their constituents the things that they need and what that critical care actually entails. But I do think that there's this new common ground with global health, because now everyone knows what it means to keep their children home from school. Now everyone knows what it means to go months or years without seeing a loved one or hugging one of your friends. Everybody now understands the reality of having to leave your job because of a threat to your safety or the health of your family. So we've essentially experienced what families in malaria endemic countries experience every single day. This is a moment to really connect that idea or that reality in these meetings. It's not just going to connect now with those staff who've traveled with us, who've gone out into the field, who've slept under a bed net, who've taken an anti-malarial medication. This is going to be able to land really well with staff who maybe haven't set foot out of this country and don't know anything about malaria. And I think that's really important to remember, that we've all lived a common experience for the last year. That is an experience that so many around the world have to live every single day. We still have to somehow break through, because there are so many different things that are trying to grab congressional attention in this moment in time. Mike, how do we do that?
For the last 10 years, Nothing But Nets has been always up on Capitol Hill, always knocking on doors, always building a relationship. Because right now, even in the time of Zoom, even in the time of digital everything, real connections are important. So you as champions, you out there as champions, are so vital to this cause, because members of Congress, as JC said, have very short attention spans, and their staffs are overwhelmed with everything that's going on. They are working from home just like us. They are at the other end of a computer screen. You building that relationship has been so vital. The way in which JC, you and I have taken the time to meet with staff, have taken them on trips, and how we have tried to use social media and op-eds and everything else to just keep the attention on. It's the drumbeat. The drumbeat is so vital. And I think that it's really important that we continue to have these moments to remind members of Congress and their staff how vital it is that we end malaria.
I think it's critical that our grassroots champions continue to keep up that drumbeat, because members of Congress want to hear from their constituents. They want to know that what they're doing is something that your community values. So let's tie that a little bit right there. When you're in your meetings, talking about why malaria matters to your community is one of the most important things you can do. You could think about it like an elevator pitch. So I'll give you two really fast. My name's JC Guy. I am from Columbus, Ohio, and malaria matters to me for two big reasons. The first, I'm an Army brat. Columbus has a huge veteran population, and it is very hard to find a member of the military who has not come into contact with malaria while deployed overseas, especially those who are like my dad and are the Vietnam era. The second really important reason, and this is what I would tell my member of Congress, I'm a new mom to the greatest little boy, and Mike is a new dad to the funniest little girl. And we are so lucky as new parents in Washington, D.C., or if I was referencing Columbus, Ohio, that we get to go to bed without worrying about our child dying from a simple thing like a mosquito bite. And there are millions of new moms and dads around the world who don't get that same kind of security and safety when they go to bed at night. So that's why it should matter. We should try to be protecting these families all around the world that are just like us, who are fighting this treatable and preventable disease every single day. So now I am going to make us switch to something, and I promise it's our last wonky thing before we get into what does your meeting look like. We're actually going to talk a little bit about the Congressional Calendar really quickly, and then we're going to go into what you're actually asking for from Congress. So Mike, kick us off here. Where are we?
Congress must approve a budget for we are going into fiscal year 22 by September 30th of this year. That's when fiscal year 21 ends. So fiscal year 22 starts, and a lot is going to happen between now and then.
Our efforts as you support the President's Malaria Initiative, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, as well as support funding for Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which is CDC, the Department of Defense and their malaria funding, and of course, our UN partners and agency partners. So we'll show you a little graph here that shows where malaria funding comes from all over the world. So you can see that a big chunk comes from the United States, but a really big chunk also comes from endemic countries themselves. It also comes from private organizations you can see on there. And then our multilateral institutions, just our multilateral programs like the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria. Your funding ask this year focuses just on two things. The first is that we are supportive of stable or level funding for the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. The second thing we are asking for is for an increase for the President's Malaria Initiative. This is really important, and we've broken it down into just 3 key points that we'd like you to make during your meetings. Don't worry, all of this is written down in a script for you to follow point by point, word by word for your meetings on Tuesday. The first reason that we think PMI, President's Malaria Initiative, needs an increase is to buy more things like bed nets. They need newer nets that are more effective at fighting against insecticide resistance. The second thing is that PMI needs more funding so that they can train and equip more community health workers to reach more people.
And lastly, we would like PMI to be able to address increases in manufacturing and freight costs for malaria commodities due to global supply chain disruptions caused by COVID-19.
That's your ask. And again, all of this will be really clearly written out for you. I'm not expecting anyone to memorize this right now. So Mike, let's go into something more fun. You and I have been in hundreds of meetings as congressional staff, and probably hundreds more at this point as advocates working for the UN Foundation. What are some of the most surprising things that you've experienced, not only as a staffer, but also on the other side?
So the staffers are generally young. They also have a ton of issues that they have to follow. I remember, and JC, you probably had this as well, you had probably 5 or 6 different issue areas ranging from like small business to veterans affairs to foreign assistance and tax policy. And you're just barely keeping your head above water. Usually they're a mile wide and an inch deep, and most staff can say 1 or 2 small little things about every issue, but they probably don't know a whole lot about it. That's actually a good thing for you, because you don't need to be at all intimidated by them. They are going to listen to you, and they want to listen to you.
We want to keep reminding you of is these folks are here to work with you and are excited to meet you, but please don't be intimidated by them. What are some of your do's in a Hill meeting, Mike?
I think especially on the Hill, we have to leave our politics at home. What we do in these meetings we're advocating on an issue, whether you voted for, were a supporter of your local congressman or not, or congresswoman, it doesn't matter to them. They are there to represent you. So we leave our politics at home. What I have found over this last year, it's very helpful for staff to get some of that time back. But it's also, I think, more effective for you as advocates to be to the point, to be succinct, to put our best foot forward, really. So you're shooting for 15 to 20-minute meetings. There are a ton of reasons why a member of Congress should support ending malaria. But why does it matter in El Centro, California, in Columbus, Ohio, in Bethesda, Maryland? Make the case. It does matter to your community, and it needs to matter to these members of Congress for them to be supportive.
And I think we've touched just a little bit on that before, but really tying it back to your community is going to be one of the most effective things, more than the numbers, more than the percentages, more with how effective these programs are. It's why it matters to you, and it's why it matters to your community is really the point we'd love you to focus on tomorrow. I do how you said that, Mike, to leave your politics at home. You guys might not know, but Mike and I come from offices that were on opposite sides of the political spectrum, and we tolerate each other totally fine. So we want to make sure that when you go into an office, you're respectful and truly to leave your own political affiliation at home. We're there to be a bipartisan, positive, really easy, really happy meeting for them. Tying it back to one of your previous points too, Mike, is to when you're keeping these meetings to your 15 to 20 minute kind of window, make sure that you're making your asks very clearly. And that might mean you have to practice them a couple of times. We're giving you kind of the information prior. We know that Wendy and Amma have trained you really well to be able to do that. So make sure that you practice tonight. Read your script. It's there for you for a reason. It's there to help you, and it's there to really guide you all throughout the day tomorrow. So with those great positive things, Mike, give us a couple of don'ts, and then we're going to wrap this up and stop talking. We promise.
I think my biggest thing that I said right off the bat, don't be intimidated. These staff are here to help you. They are here to represent you and your area. So just talk to them like everybody else that you meet at the grocery store. Don't answer questions that you don't know the answer to or you don't feel comfortable answering. JC and I are here, and you can always refer back to JC or I that we could follow up later to answer those questions. What about you? What are your don'ts, JC?
I think one of my favorites is to not forget your thank you note. The entire point of this whole experience, virtually or otherwise, is to make that connection with the congressional office. We're trying to bridge the gap or foster this relationship between you and your member of Congress or the congressional staff. We know it works. We know that there are long-lasting relationships that have come out of meetings just like these. I can shout out to a couple of you champions that I know keep up with your members of Congress, and is awesome. We really want you to be someone that in the future they think of when they're hosting an event in district, when maybe something has happened in the global health space and you're like, wait, I know that this could connect to malaria. Maybe I should reach out to those folks at NBN. And that's really the whole part of this day, is to make those connections. And it's going to help in the long run. It's going to help you not only get your foot in the door once, but maybe you start going back for other things and you start getting involved more and more with the office, or you just start lifting up the good work of NBN more often. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is make those connections.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for doing this. This is going to be a great next day. So we really appreciate your attention to this, and have a great one.